The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio with Dr. Alex Heublein and Dr. Josh Klapow. This is Adapt or Perish.
Welcome to Adapt or Perish, along with Dr. Alex Heublein, president of Adaptigent. I am Dr. Josh Klapow, and today we are talking strategy versus execution. And Alex, you've told me before we got going that you've got some phenomenal statistics about bands and strategy versus execution, which I think is really cool. Once again, that's what the show is. It's great business strategy, but it weaves in all the music pieces. You and I have both worked in the business industry long enough to know that between head of strategies, consultants, more consultants, more ahead of strategies, vision planning, strategy planning, there's a whole lot of time spent on, I guess, for lack of a better description, what are we going to do? And maybe when are we going to do it? But then, as you and I were talking about, actually doing it, and then more importantly, which you brought up, sustaining whatever this is that is going to be our strategy. I would just say one of the things we know just from behavioral science, this idea called behavioral drift. People are real good at initiating, if the environment's not set up to do that. And so let me hear your thoughts, and I can't wait to hear the band statistics.
Yeah, we got some good ones. Well, yeah, and everybody's heard the old saying, that success is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration, right? And I think it was Thomas Edison who said that. And it's interesting because, a lot of companies, I question whether or not that's true or if that's the right ratio or whatever. And you see a lot of companies that are, like you said, are good at strategy, they're good at vision, they're good at figuring out here's what we should do, and then when it comes down to execution, a lot of times they fall short. They drift away from the vision or the strategy, and they start doing things the way they've always done them, and they don't do a good job of implementing those strategies. On the other hand, I've seen organizations that are very, very good at execution, right? They can go out there and they've got the processes all nailed down, and they've got the people and the roles really well defined and everything else, but they're going after the wrong strategy, or they're going down the wrong road. And it doesn't matter how well you execute if you're going down the wrong road, right? There's an old saying that, no matter how far you've gone down the wrong road, it's never too late to turn back. So it's a real conundrum.
Let me stop you there. I love that second one because I've seen it, and I've never heard anyone really describe it, because I've seen it a lot. This idea of let's just get things done, right? We've got a process in place. Let's just do it. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get it done. And to your point, lots of execution, lots of getting things done, even lots of maybe products and deliverables. But to your point, like, not along anything that even sometimes remotely resembles either their strategy or what the market wants, but everybody's happy because we've made things or done things or delivered things. That's a really good one, because it's usually the other way around that you typically hear about. So great point there.
Yeah, and it's funny because, you see it sometimes in the same organization. You see these things happening simultaneously, right? Yes. Like even at Adaptigent, right? Sometimes, and we're not a perfect company. Sometimes we'll have really great strategy, and we maybe don't execute on it as well as we could. But then other times, you're right. Everybody's happy because they're doing stuff and they feel like they're accomplishing something. And the reality is they're not. I mean, they're accomplishing stuff that isn't really contributing to the goal. And it's funny because, there's this concept. I hired a new CTO last year, and his big saying, he didn't really come up with it, but he's very fond of this saying, is that you have to focus on outcomes over output.
That's good. Oh, that's almost an Instagram post. I love it.
It is. It's like one of those motivational posters you see on people's walls or whatever, right? And so, but you do have to focus on those outcomes, and those outcomes really are defined, or the outcomes you're trying to achieve are defined by your strategy. But a lot of times people get really focused on the output, and they don't actually focus on the outcomes that you're trying to achieve for your business or your organization or your customers or your constituents or whomever. And that really, so I think it comes down to, how do you strike the right balance? You'll hear some management consulting experts, that there's some famous quotes about, execution is everything, and, the 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration thing. But, I find a lot of the people that think that way, they think it's all about execution, are typically people that have never really had any good ideas in their lives. At least that's kind of how I perceive it. Because having good ideas and coming up with a good strategy is really, really hard. And then it changes. The market changes, your company changes, your the geopolitical landscape changes, and you have to pivot. And you have to change that strategy, sometimes in close to real time. And that's tough. It's tough to do that. But then on the flip side of the coin, you see companies very, very frequently that go out there, they have a good strategy. They don't execute on it. And then on the flip side, you've got the companies that execute well, but probably don't have the right strategy. And so the question at hand is, how do you balance those things? Because typically leaders are good at one or the other.
Right.
Typically leaders are either strategy people or they're execution people. And rarely do you see people that are extremely talented in both areas. Like you take Apple, for instance. You had a guy like Steve Jobs, visionary, brilliant mind, great from a long-term strategy standpoint.
But he almost destroyed his company, right?
He did a couple of times, right?
Right. Yeah.
So he hired Tim Cook, who's now the CEO, and Tim was the chief operating officer.
That's right.
And, equally brilliant guy, super intelligent, but much more focused on, well, how do we execute? How do we turn these ideas into reality? How do we make sure that we're doing everything right throughout our supply chain and throughout all the processes we have to go through and supporting our customers and all that? But rarely do you see that combination of visionary and true sort of operational excellence type of people. And I think it's important to recognize that, because I think there's a lot of people that think they're good at both.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to ask you that, because that's something that I see a lot is you get up to this incredibly high level, you're CEO, and whether it's your own, I don't know, overconfidence or sometimes insecurity in the sense that you believe that others believe that you should be good at both. I've seen a lot of CEOs who aren't willing to go there and say, I'm an operations guy or gal. I've got to the top, but I don't have the strategy piece. I just, it's amazing how many times I see that. And a lot of times it looks like overconfidence, but I kind of see it as sometimes sort of insecurity in the sense that I'm at the top. I should know all these things. Do you see that? Oh
yeah. I mean, I see it in myself.
Yes.
So I have to bring it.
Dr. Heublein, let's, we can go there, because I am a psychologist.
Well, yeah, maybe you can do some therapy for me here. So I like to think I'm good at a lot of things, but I had a really interesting conversation with my boss a couple of weeks ago, and he said, Alex, you're great at strategy. You've come up with all these ideas for the company, but your execution needs some work, man. And he was really candid with me about it. He's like, you got to get better at operational excellence. You've got one half of the equation, and I'm not saying you're terrible at operational excellence, but you need to. That's an area you need to work on. And I think part of it is that people tend to be either big picture people or detail people.
Yeah.
And I'm much more of a big picture person, right? I don't want to get down into the sordid details of every little thing. And some people love that stuff, and God bless them, because
I know.
People, right? But I think recognizing that and being able to look at yourself as a leader in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? There are areas that I need to improve in. There are areas that I need to get better at. But also, you've got to build a team around you that are and this is a cliche at this point, but you've got to build teams of people that are good at the things you're not good at as a leader. So you have to bring in people that are good at the fine details and making sure that every little thing happens. Because if they don't, they can really derail the whole strategy. If you don't execute well and you're not operating well from an efficiency standpoint and from a detail standpoint, the best laid plans can go awry very quickly. And so I think that's trick, right? There's always a trade-off between the big picture focus and the detail focus. And it's hard to do both simultaneously. And so I think the first lesson learned is you got to recognize that you can't sit there and think either through insecurity or arrogance or hubris or whatever. You can't sit there and think, oh yeah, no, I'm the master of all domains here, because almost no one is.
Well, and let's talk about both on the strategy side and the execution side, the willingness to hear the other side. The reason I say that is, if you look on the strategy side and your big picture, you are looking at, you're not paying attention to details, but you are looking at the bigger picture, the bigger conceptual picture. And sometimes because of that, you miss details, operational details that quite potentially will force you to change your strategy. And I've seen that become, a major conflict in organizations. I want us to go this direction. And the operation folks are like, we can't, you can't.
Yeah,
it's
right.
not going, but then on the flip side, I've also seen this, particularly with people who are incredibly detail oriented and they're in the weeds. It's not just that they can't see or they have a challenge seeing the bigger picture, but they push back against it because they feel that it's too big. It's too much. There's no need to go there. And so this idea of, having the guts to listen to the other side, the confound you have in there is if those people are either not equal in the organization or if they haven't given each other permission to, again, you've talked about this adaptigent, to be honest. Tell me what I need to hear so that we can do this together. I can't tell you how many times I see in organizations that creates this incredible, passive stalemate, right? And it's not
absolutely.
a giant argument. It's just like things are going nowhere because of all those things happening at a very micro level.
Yeah, you do. And it's really interesting because there's an academic theory called organizational ambidexterity.
Yes.
And it really focuses on this
that.
very idea, right? As an organization, you have to be ambidextrous. And it's not sort of, you can use both hands, left hand, right hand kind of ambidexterity. It's really about this idea of being able to have the right strategy, the vision to push things forward while simultaneously executing well, generating profitability, doing the right things for your shareholders and your employees and so on and so forth. So there's a whole body of research that's been done on this. And it's really fascinating because when you get down into it, there's different ways of implementing organizational ambidexterity. One way is what people call structural ambidexterity, which is to say, you know what, my whole organization can't be ambidextrous. So I'm going to carve off a part of my organization to focus on strategy and vision and innovation and things like that. And then I'm going to have a separate part of my business organizationally in the sort of corporate hierarchy that focuses on the execution and whatnot. And a lot of big companies did that for a long time. If you think back to the 70s and 80s, you had Bell Labs, which was part of the Bell telephone companies back before it was deregulated. And, Bell Labs came out with some just astonishing innovations throughout the years, but it was kind of this almost separate protected organization that was allowed to go off and do these things and kind of not work in the rest of the detail oriented, execution oriented hierarchy. And IBM did the same thing. IBM had their Watson labs, and HP had the same thing. And so a lot of technology companies went and did this strategy, or executed on this strategy of kind of, you just separate them. Like you almost, it's like two different parts of the house. And, you don't generally let those guys intermingle too much. And that kind of fell out of favor, I think, probably in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of companies looked at it and they said, there's a couple of issues with doing it from a structural standpoint. One of them is the vision and the strategy and the innovations that are coming out of one group don't move over to the execution group very well. So there's this almost, you've put up these barriers organizationally. And so not surprisingly, the flow of ideas from strategy to execution, that flow gets inhibited. So they looked at it and they said, maybe that's not the best thing to do. And then the other thing they found was that the execution arm of the business was the one that was generating all the money today.
Yes.
Right. And so they had a lot of power. And so they said, hey, man, we're generating tons of profitability. I know these strategy and vision guys want to go off in this crazy direction, but that's just nuts. And it stifled the strategy and the vision and the innovation because they had all the money.
Right. And nobody, sorry, nobody cares about your stupid ideas. We're trying to run a business here.
We're trying to make money, man.
Right.
Yeah. So that kind of model, I think, fell out of favor. I mean, it still exists in a lot of companies. But I think the smart companies sat down and said, we've got to improve the flow of information and ideas and strategy back and forth between those organizations. And then there's a second way of looking at it, though, which is to say, you know what, you don't have to think in this old school hierarchy, separating parts of the business out. What you have to do is instill this idea of ambidexterity in your entire organization from the top down, that we have to be good at both execution and we have to be good at strategy, and do that at every level within the organization. And that's a much more difficult thing to do. It's a more difficult thing to build a culture that can do both simultaneously. Doing it structurally is really simple, right? You just redraw the org chart and you put a person in charge of operations, and you put a person in charge of R&D, right? So it's like the easy way out.
Oh, no, I hate it. I'm sorry. I hate that because we've drawn the org chart. We made the straight lines and the dotted lines, and it looks really good. We're looking at a chart and it looks perfect. So we're good to go. And then it's a shit show sometimes, just because the org chart doesn't describe the people who are doing the job. I mean, it doesn't, and job description doesn't cut it.
Well, it's the classic, looks good on paper kind of situation, right? I mean, It looks great. It all makes sense. Everybody goes the thumbs up. Yeah, that looks great. And then you find that there's all these unintended consequences of it, right? And so what they call that, the academics call, kind of building it into your culture, they call that contextual ambidexterity, where you have to be able to either do strategy or do execution well, but it depends on the context in which you're operating. And that's in sort of infused throughout the business. And that is much, much more difficult to implement. But once you do implement it, you can move much more quickly. You can achieve the best of both worlds, but it takes a lot of time to do it. And you have to have leaders that are committed to not only doing it, but also committed to making some mistakes along the way. Saying, well, this isn't going to work perfectly. It's a little bit of a science experiment. And there's no perfect answer for every organization that kind of cuts across all organizations. But that's one of the tools that the academics have come up with and said, but at the end of the day, you have to achieve this. You can't just be one or the other. You can't just be a strategy and vision and innovation organization, and you can't just be an execution and an operations organization. You have to do both, and you have to do both simultaneously. So there's a lot of great research around how to do that, and lots of great case studies around it. And then I think, the second thing that we learned a lot about, or at least that I've learned throughout my career and a lot of the research I've done, is that, you know, one of the hardest parts of execution is that it's just a lot of work. And sometimes, you know, the strategy people or the vision people or whatever, man, they just don't want to get down into the roll up your sleeves, get in there, nitty gritty, grind it out kind of stuff, right? They hate that. And so, you know, one of the things that's important in terms of the execution piece is choosing the right tools and choosing the right things that will enable you to make the execution go faster and make the execution go more seamlessly. So I'll give you an example of that. It's a small example, but, you know, at Adaptigent, at the company I work for, you know, we build software platforms that allow organizations to go out and execute on a strategy, but do it in a way where they can do it very quickly, very cost effectively, and do it in a fashion where they don't have to get down into a lot of the details. And so that's important, right? Having the right tools. It's almost like, I don't know if you've ever had this happen. I'm sure you have. You know, you have some problem with your house and you need to call a plumber or whomever, an electrician. And, you know, you've tried to fix the power outlet or the light switch or whatever, but you can't work it out. And then some dude shows up with some magic tool you've never seen.
Yes. And it
takes them 5 minutes, right?
And they still charge you $300 for the service call.
Precisely, right?
But that's fine.
Tool. And you're like, God, I didn't even know that tool existed. I mean, if I'd known that tools existed, I could have fixed this thing hours ago, right?
That is such a great example. I've been there so many times. And you're right. It's the tool. The tool's almost magic. I mean, because you try your basic tools. And God, the analogy for business is so true. You know, you're smart. You're somewhat resourceful. You're handy. You try the basic tools. You got a screwdriver, you got a hammer, you got some basic things, and you've tried it, and maybe you've looked online and you've consulted, et cetera, et cetera. But the person who comes in, they come in with a tool that is not magic in that no one in the world has it, but it is magic to you because you're not privy to that world. I mean, I'm envisioning Adaptigent. I'm like literally envisioning. I mean, am I hitting it? I mean, that's
you are. And that's what we do. Like we have, and again, they're not magic tools, but they're tools that allow us to really go in and the funny thing is we go talk to people, we'll go talk to prospects in the sales cycle. And 8 times out of 10, the people will see our stuff and go, I didn't even know something like that existed. It's just like the plumber that pulls out this special wrench and you've been sitting there with your wrench and you're stripping the nuts or screws or whatever, and you're just making a mess of the whole thing. This dude shows up with his magic wrench, 2 turns of that wrench, and oh yeah, you're fixed. It's that kind of thing. That's what we really try to focus on. So I think that a lot of companies don't realize that the execution part can be, you can reduce the amount of effort, you can reduce the amount of time, you can reduce the amount of just sheer frustration, right? Because we've all tried to fix something and done a horrible job of it. And then, you know, you go, oh, if I'd just known that Home Depot sold this special wrench or this special whatever, I could have fixed this thing in 10 minutes as opposed to 2 hours of yelling and screaming at whatever it is I'm trying to fix. So we spend a lot of time doing that, but you know, those tools are out there, right, for execution. And so looking for tools that can help you be more efficient, that can automate some of the things that you're trying to do, they make it easier to go out and execute. And that makes it easier to ultimately drive the strategy forward and drive the objectives of the business forward.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask you, because like I'm totally following with you, but I completely fell off how this ties into music. Like the statistics that you said. So like, I was all ready. And now I'm thinking like, okay, there's no way. So now I want you to pull out your magic, what you call it, sort of magic philosophical semantics communication tool, maybe a little bit of sales. And I want you to pivot to music seamlessly without any of us who are participating in this noticing that you made a pivot.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do my best.
Go.
Well, and so you think about the music industry, and it's a really good parallel because, you know, as a band, you've got to have the creative power and the vision and the strategy to create great music. And there are lots of bands that have done that throughout the history of music. But then there's the execution side. So you have to go out and not only dream up this great music, but you've got to be able to play it. And then you've got to go on tour. And you've got to play this stuff every night or every other night for, heaven knows how long. And so you run into the same kind of problem with every band that's ever existed. It's not just a matter of writing music. It's not just a matter of going out on the road and doing a tour to support your new album or whatever. You have to be good at both. And some bands are really good at writing music, and you go see them live and you're like, these guys aren't so great, right? We've all been to those concerts, right? And then there's the bands that are, the music's okay, but man, they're really good live. They're so good. And so you'll hear people talk about this. So I went out and did a little research because I thought, how many shows does a band or an artist play over their career? And so here's the little trivia question for you. Okay, out of Elton John, Kiss, or Styx, who do you think has done the most shows? Lifetime.
Kiss.
Elton John, Kiss, or Styx. So you're going to say Kiss.
Kiss.
You're close. You're close.
Well,
it turns out it's Elton John.
Okay, I was gonna go. So my Styx was I had eliminated Styx. I was thinking Elton John because he's old.
Yeah, he's kind of old. Yeah.
So I was thinking that, and then Kiss. I was just thinking because just the amount of marketing and sort of performance piece. I thought maybe they would do that. All right, Elton John, go ahead. Give me the
Elton John. So he's done, according to this database I found online, he's done a total of 3,832 shows in his life. Now, wow. You think about that. That's 11 years straight of playing a show for 3.5 hours or so every night for 11 years straight. Now, obviously, he didn't do that. He did it over a much longer time period. But 3,832 shows, that is astonishing. And that guy's got to get up there and execute every night. Right. Yep. Every time he gets on stage, he's playing complex music. He's up there on the piano. I mean, it's amazing. Kiss did 2,676 shows. So they're kind of they're number two. Styx is third though, but Styx still, I was surprised by your beloved band, 2,445 shows. So that beats out Metallica, Rush, U2, and a whole bunch of other bands. So it's so you see the parallels in the music industry though, right? Mm-hmm. You see this idea of having to write music and then the idea of having to perform that music well on stage. And even when you're recording the album. So the great bands are the ones that can strike that balance really effectively. And they're the ones that make a lot of money.
So that's super interesting. And we only got a couple minutes left, but that was super interesting. I was thinking about what you just said about the execution piece of it, right? And in any industry, not any industry, many industries, there's wiggle room. This is how crazy this show is, Alex. The first thing that came to my mind was Six Sigma, as you were talking about execution, right? Because if you're a band, like you can kind of have a crappy show, right? And people aren't happy, and you can't have 100 crappy shows, or maybe you can. But it is different than a tech company when, X number of chips are faulty. Or is it? I mean, I was just thinking about execution and sort of quality of execution.
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think that there is something of a difference. But at the end of the day, I think every company makes, every company has crappy shows, just like musicians, right? Every company does it every once in a while. The trick is, how do you minimize that? And how do you go out there and continue to drive towards that strategy and that vision? And I think part of it for musicians is that, they're all adrenaline junkies, right? They love to get up on stage and play. And that's such a rush for a lot of these guys, right? It's an adrenaline rush, I'm sure. So it kind of helps them. But the trick is, when you're executing within an organization,
it's not an adrenaline rush every time.
Well, yeah, sometimes it's not, right? I mean, you're the customer support person that's answered their 70-second call of the day about,
and you're not jacked up. You're totally jacked up, ready to talk to the person. Hello,
hey, how you doing? Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard to do that, but there's definitely parallels there, and so I think one of the lessons learned from the music industry is that you have to find people that really have not only a lot of pride in what they do, but they enjoy what they do. And not only is that good for them as individuals, but it's also great for you as a company, being able to find people that are truly excited about what they do and they actually enjoy what they do. They can get up and do, show after show, and they can get up and have that enthusiasm for it, which is hard. I mean, particularly in today's job environment, today's job market, it is hard to find people that are going to get truly enthusiastic about what you're doing. But I think it's worth the effort. It's worth the effort to find those people that truly enjoy the execution piece of it. They enjoy their jobs, and they can do it over and over and over again, just like Elton John or Kiss or Styx or whomever. That I think is an important aspect of it. So, figuring out how you do the ambidexterity part is important. Mm-hmm. Finding the right tools to make the job easy or easier for the people, and finding the people and building the right culture that encourages them to enjoy what they're doing and have the enthusiasm for it. I think those are the elements that you need to be truly successful as a business or any kind of organization in terms of balancing out your strategy and your vision with your execution and your operational capabilities.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and having the patience even under pressure to do it right, timely, but right, because there's everything that you just said can't be rushed. And if it is, sometimes that's the downfall. So, being willing to do everything you just said, but being willing to do that in your organization in a way that promotes effective strategy, execution, and has the match of people. I love that last part, because that's what I see, which is you missed it. You might have got it great on the strategy and even the execution, but like you said, if you don't have people who love or are dedicated to this strategy and this execution, then it doesn't happen. And I think that's so important. And again, this is why these are tough topics. And it's why not everybody is Elton John, Styx, or Kiss.
Well, we all aspire to be, right? But yeah, you're right.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you everybody for joining us for another segment of Adapter Parish. You stay tuned to Tony Kurre Radio, because you're going to hear yet another amazing episode coming soon, and that's Adapt or Perish.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.